Hi, and welcome to Podcasting 101 with Rachel. This podcast is for busy female entrepreneurs who run their own businesses and want to start a podcast, or who may already have a podcast. I want to share practical information and tips on how you can get your podcast started and managing it along the way. I'll also be interviewing other female podcast hosts to give you real insight into what it's like having your own podcast. Hi, welcome to today's episode. Today I have with me Holly Wood. Hi Holly, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Holly is the Flourish Mentor, which is a digital marketing focused business mentor and positive psychology coach for women entrepreneurs. Her mission is to help women flourish and reach their success by attracting their ideal clients that truly align. Her ultimate client attraction system infuses her 13 years plus of digital marketing experience and growing a brand online with a positive psychology toolkit that addresses the importance of mindset alongside strategy. Wow, that sounds so interesting. I have seen your positive psychology posts coming out on LinkedIn and they're so interesting. And
thank you.
Listening to your podcast recently, you touch on those as well, which is, I think positive psychology is such a good thing. I think we all need to embrace being more positive in our lives rather than focusing on the negative.
Yeah, and I'm definitely leaning into that more, which is like, well done, because my bio is a bit of a mouthful, I feel. But
I was like...
But I think, my background is digital marketing, and my kind of genius zone is about building brand online and marketing yourself online, but so much of mindset comes into it. And I've studied psychology and more recently positive psychology and coaching, and I've just realized that the two just go hand in hand. And so thank you for noticing the LinkedIn, because that's kind of a new thing for me, is leaning into more specifically the positive psychology side of things. So there'll be more of that to come.
Yeah, they're really interesting. I like reading some of those articles on LinkedIn and having deeper diving into the mindset things, because it's something that we all struggle with. But I think I myself, as an online entrepreneur as well, it's something that, you kind of go in some kind of cycle with feeling good and then letting it kind of feel a little bit negative again. And it's good to try and have some tools to bring you back to the positive side of things and back with refocusing your business as well.
Totally, and just bringing all that balance, because it's hard being an entrepreneur, isn't it? And so you need that kind of that well-being is as important to your success as the kind of strategy is in the marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and how you got started in your business before we go into your awesome podcast?
Yeah, I'll give you the abridged version, because otherwise I feel like it will take over the whole episode, Rachel. But in a nutshell, I have a fairly sort of what I say traditional background, i.e., education, uni, got a job after uni. I always worked in kind of events and that side of things. I was a wedding planner for a while, worked in commercial events. So it was always quite interested in people and and kind of events, I suppose, and kind of experiential activities. And I started, I guess, about 13 years ago now. It's probably even a bit longer. I started a blog, and it was before blogging was a thing. I feel like it was quite this thing that nobody really understood or knew what it was. My hubby was always in digital marketing, and I remember him saying, you should just start a blog to write about the events that you organise and the weddings, and kind of a bit like, in my head, an online CV, a portfolio. There was nothing commercial about it. There was not like brand sponsorship deals and things back then. It was just a pure like, oh, let's use this kind of new online tool to document my work. And that's how my, I guess, foray into digital marketing started. And it quickly became more of a, what is now called a lifestyle blog, because I had moved from London to Manchester, and I was kind of documenting discovering a new city. And, people from down south were asking me, like, where do you go out to eat? And it became what is now kind of termed a food and lifestyle blog, but back then was purely a creative outlet for me and just a way of documenting what was going on in my life. And I quickly realised I was ranking everywhere. Like when you Googled, places to eat in Manchester, my blog would come up, and I was kind of like, hold on, how does that work? And so I started to kind of really understand more about SEO and digital marketing, and social media started to come about, and it was about how I could utilize social media to grow my blog. And again, that was still quite early days with anybody even thinking like that. So that's kind of how the journey of digital marketing started. I, again, in a nutshell, started to run events for other bloggers in Manchester. And this was on the kind of side to my 9 to 5, and started to build a bit of a community up here in the north of people who were then bloggers, now content creators or influencers, and just, getting together and chatting about how to take nice photos. We didn't have really cool apps back then, and we didn't have it wasn't a job, for people. We were just figuring out how to make something of this really cool hobby that we all had, or the shared interest. And that kind of grew quite quickly into more of a membership community, hosting workshops. I founded the Northern Blog Awards here in Manchester, and suddenly was stood on stage in front of 250 people, agencies, brands, and was kind of like, when did that happen? And I started to commercialize that, my blog, and work with brands as influencer marketing was becoming a thing. And I left my job, I had a baby, and kind of started to explore the world of entrepreneurialism, which I definitely didn't identify as an entrepreneur back then. I was just like, how am I going to make this work? What am I going to do to bring some money in? But I loved it. I absolutely loved working for myself. I loved building something myself. And what I'd realized by that point was, 7 years, was I'd built so many skills on how to build a brand and how to market yourself online. And I'd always loved that side of things anyway, that I started to teach other women, and it would be women who did different things, like had different businesses, but were trying to build an online presence. And that's kind of the start of my journey as a mentor, as a coach, which is where I sit now, kind of through the turmoil of the pandemic and pivoting and kind of figuring out where my skills lie now. I love to mentor women who are growing their own businesses with their business, but also with their marketing online. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
Yeah. At what point did you introduce the podcast, or that you felt like you came across podcasts and felt like, because you seem to be like blogging from like the very beginning of when it started to.
I'm old. Yeah. in blogging terms, I am old. Yeah. Do you know what? It's a good one, and I should have looked this up, because I think must have had my podcast for at least 4 years. Maybe a bit longer. But it was certainly when I was still predominantly blogging, but starting to build my business, which back then I had a business called We Blog North. So that was the community that I built, and that was what the awards were based around, and workshops. So it would have been when I had We Blog North, and I was super interested, and so I had a baby at the time, in this notion of being a woman, a mum, trying to make your own business, trying to be a good partner, trying to be a good mate, trying to be healthy and fit. And so this notion of can we have it all just kept coming up in conversation with me and my peers, my girlfriends were like, can we really have it all? Do you know what I mean? Can we have the job that we want and be a good mum and all of this? And so that's where the idea kind of came from. So it would have been, kind of during We Blog North times that I started it again. I want to say before podcasts were kind of as big as they were. I mean, they were big in the kind of probably fiction space and the more what I would say professional space, but your average kind of content creator didn't really have a podcast. So
no.
I was just giving it a bit of a go, and I wanted a platform where I could really deep dive with other women, and that's how my podcast started. It was all about interviews. It shifted a little bit now, but it started as, you know, deep hour conversations with other women who were, you know, exploring this idea of creating their own businesses and carving their own life.
So when you came up with that idea, how did you find the women that you had to come on? Were they people that you knew already, that you worked with, or the people from the blogging kind of group that were in the same position as you?
I started, as with everything I do, I always look at who is in my network already, because I believe that's the easiest place to start. It's often the most comfortable place to start. And it felt to me natural to kind of almost continue the conversations that I was having offline with women online. And so I knew that, you know, particularly as content creators, that is kind of predominantly who I started interviewing. I knew that they would be comfortable like talking and being kind of interviewed. So that's how it started. I just looked at my immediate community. I looked at the blogging community, the women that I'd gotten to know through Instagram and the influencer kind of community, and, you know, approached, I think, 3 or 4 of them just to say, look, I'd love to just have this chat with you, totally informal. That's kind of how I always approach everything I do. Let's like try and have a little bit of a laugh with it and see what happens. And so I lined up, I think, three of the women and recorded them to kind of get a few under my belt, and then loved it. They loved it. And I was like, yeah, let's roll with this. Let's do it. And kind of did a first season of it.
Yeah. So did you plan like just a season to start with, or did you kind of go all in and say, right, I'm just going to go and do it every week, or however often you...
Can I be really honest with you, Rachel? There wasn't much of a plan other than, and to be honest, there probably still isn't enough of a plan, which I like, do not listen to me, anybody who is listening to this, like, be more organized than me, because I definitely didn't know how I wanted it to how I wanted to shape it. With everything I do it because I kind of want to, and I feel like it's the right thing. I don't over strategize things. I let it kind of unfold, because I didn't know if I would enjoy creating podcasts. I didn't know if people would enjoy listening to them. And then, so I didn't want to like map out, I'm going to do a 12 episode series and then I'm going to break. And I still don't really do that. I kind of go where my passion goes and where my energy goes. So, you know, this is why we need people like you, Rachel, to organise us, right? Because I know that I could be far more strategic and far more organised with it. But certainly starting off, I just wanted to see where it would take me. So I definitely wanted to get a few episodes recorded. I remember kind of probably 3, 4, maybe even 5 episodes recorded before I launched, so that people could have a few episodes to listen to when I launched, rather than it just being one sat there. So I definitely remember kind of blocking time and energy to kind of pre-record some, make sure they were all good to go, and then have them sat there ready and waiting before I did the full kind of, I've got this podcast. But other than that, I let it kind of roll to where it feels like then there's a natural pause. So I had a bit of a natural pause after interviewing a lot of guests. And then I started to play around with the format a little bit in season 2. And like now I've got a very different format, largely because of lockdown, and kind of pivoting slightly more into the business coaching space rather than purely content creation space. So I've got quite a different format now. But again, 2023, I'll be mixing it up and kind of, you know, reintroducing interviews and things like that again. So I'm a believer in things should be fluid and grow with you and evolve with you.
I'd agree with that. I do think that once if you want your podcast to grow and change, and something happens in your business and you change it, I don't think that you should be afraid to change it. I'm all for planning and getting all that started with, but I don't want to be, or I don't think you should be too rigid in that planning, because you're kind of making a rod for your own back then. If something changes, circumstances changes, you should be, and that is kind of one of the benefits of running your own business and you being in charge, is that you can make those changes quickly and change your mind, because you're not answering to anybody else. It's your own decision. So I do like that. And I think that if your podcast, if you feel that it would work in a different way or a different format, you shouldn't be afraid of changing it up, really, because it could end up, if it's not working, you're kind of feeling like you're flogging a dead horse, really, in that respect. And I think it will come across in your podcast with your listeners if you're doing something that doesn't spark that joy. And I think you do have to enjoy doing podcasting. I think if you feel like it's, I mean, yes, sometimes it does feel like a bit of a chore when you think, oh, I've got all this to do, but ultimately you must enjoy podcasting to carry on doing that, to doing podcasting as a thing for your business.
And I love it. I really do love it. I had no idea that I would love it. Again, I think it was just somebody at some point said, oh, why don't you try that, like give podcasting a go. I really like the idea of, I'm somebody who likes depth, and I like connection. It's one of my kind of my values and what I look for in relationships, but also with clients. And I like that there's a deeper sense of connection with the podcast. I feel like there's something about having someone in your ears. It feels much more intimate. It feels like you can go into a deeper level than you would on social media, for instance. And, I'm a blogger, so I like long form content. Like, that's where I come from. I come from like bashing out, 800,000 words about something. So kind of short captions and things were quite alien to me. So when I discovered podcasting, it felt really comfortable. Like, I like being able to go a little bit deeper on subjects. And I think that's one of the real strengths of podcasting. It gives you that ability. So I know I absolutely love it. And there's I've talked about changing format and things, but there's always been a theme. I always have a theme running through that. Can we have it always the kind of thread that runs through everything? But I think you can play around and kind of discover what fits right at the time for you.
Yeah, like different aspects of that as well. It's not just something that is static, is it? You can change it, and as you change and your business changes, you're still going to be thinking that same question as you go on in your journey, and so it is still relevant to that.
Absolutely.
So in terms of tech, how did you get on with like doing the recording? Did you go out and buy mics, or did you kind of, because one thing I think is a bit of a barrier sometimes, it is equipment wise.
Totally.
And I think that you don't need to have expensive equipment to start. I mean, it's always nice if you can get a nice mic and etc. So how did you find all the tech side of things?
So I just want to start by saying I am not a techie person. And so if anybody's listening to this and thinking, oh, I can't start a podcast because I'm not very tech minded, like, you absolutely can, because I'm not. And you can figure it out. It doesn't have to be difficult. You can get support. I had somebody help me set it up. And then once it was set up, I kind of knew then how to add a recording or how to upload a recording. So that side of things, like, definitely don't let it be a barrier. In terms of like route of entry, I remember buying a little Rode mic, like a little Rode sit on your desk mic. I think it was about 60 quid from Amazon. And to be honest, that was, again, I want to say, Rachel, you might disagree, but if we're looking at like 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't, even back then, like, there wasn't as many apps and readily available tools. I do feel like
right, there wasn't,
you could probably buy a really good mic now for like 20 quid on Amazon, whereas back then maybe 60 quid was like the entry point, but even that, kind of was a worthwhile investment. So I remember getting a mic and having some headphones, because I knew that was going to help the sound. And because it was interviews, I first recorded through Skype. So I used a tool, and I'm trying to think of what the app was. I might have to come back to you. But there was an app that would pull the audio from a Skype recording.
Okay.
and then just turn it into an MP4, right? And so then you just had that file, and then I would edit it in GarageBand. So I still
Okay.
edit my podcast in GarageBand
Mm-hmm.
because I find it really simple to just. I don't overly edit my podcast, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So because they're quite conversational, but if there was anything like a massive coughing fit in the middle, then I could just very quickly sort of snip it out. And that's about as fancy as I got. Now, I think, I'm sat here wearing my AirPods, which didn't exist when I started podcasting. The sound is really good. I have recorded when I was away in Italy a podcast on my phone using a voice memo app, and that was great quality. So I do think, particularly now, you don't need fancy equipment to start a podcast. Yes, you can have really high production quality. However, don't let it block you from starting, because you can literally just sit there with your phone and create a podcast.
They're so good. The quality of them. It's the same with cameras. I mean, people make films on iPhones. I mean, there's
exactly.
I'm a bit of a film geek myself, and I've read in my film magazines about people who have entered. I can't remember what film it was now that made it on all on the iPhone, edited it on the iPhone as well.
Yeah,
and
probably
then,
like Cannes Film Festival or something.
Yeah, exactly. So to record it, I mean, headphones do help. Like you say, like having your AirPods, or sometimes you can get the normal plug-in ones that have the little microphone on them, just so it's closer to your mouth. But I think that it shouldn't be a barrier to stopping you from starting. I have met a few people out there that are kind of like, oh, you need all this quality, and myself, like my husband's a sound engineer, and he, like, when he listens to stuff, he can pick stuff out that I can't, and I get that. And if you're making a radio program or whatever, then yes, you do have to have it like that because people are paying for it. But I think that at our level, as long as it's not too distracting about what's going on in the background, you're not got somebody banging the mic or there's a big noise, I think that I've listened to so many podcasts, and very few people I've thought, I can't listen to that. Like probably none, maybe one. That was it. And that is just shows that you don't have to think, right, I've got to get like a proper studio.
Yes. Anything I would say on sound is, think equipment wise, you can use kind of what you've got, but definitely try to be somewhere that you're not disturbed by ambient noise, because I think that is the only thing, unless you are literally, that's the style of your podcast, you're like a roving reporter, or out on the streets, it can be distracting for the listener if there's too much going on around, can't there? So at the very least, try and be in a quiet room somewhere whilst you're recording, and I feel like that's enough to start.
So those things to do that, like closing windows, turning off fans, make sure your phone's turned off, all those little things will just contribute to the non-background noise, which and then everything else just gets, and then speaking clearly, and having the microphone kind of near you as opposed to miles away. But people generally pretty savvy, pretty when it comes to your phones and things like that. These, like say, the tech is so more advanced even from a few years ago. Even there's so many different apps and everything out there for you to use. And
absolutely.
What podcast? Words out there. What podcast host do you use?
So I'm on SoundCloud. So I upload straight into there. I know when I had some help setting it up, that was all done for me, and the RSS feed and all that techie side was kind of sorted. But SoundCloud for me is so easy because, as I said earlier, I just edit my podcast in GarageBand, save it down as an MP4, and then upload it into SoundCloud, and you get to put in all your little, tags and your show notes and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then it's straight up online. So I find it super, super easy.
I've not used SoundCloud. When I first started, I used Anchor, which is linked to Spotify. And you can, I think you can even record in the platform now, because you can add, you can edit in there, you can add sound things, little jingles and music and all sorts of things if you want to. I don't do that. I've used Captivate now for this podcast, but that's because I'm a podcast manager as well. I wanted to try like a paid for platform, and Captivate a kind of a new company, and they're all about their growth. They have some growth labs, so that was kind of like part of my own podcast manager journey as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say if it's your first podcast, because it's a paid platform as well. And perhaps it's good. Is SoundCloud free, or is that a paid platform?
No, I think it's free. I'm pretty sure I'm on the free. I think as with loads of things, there's different tiers. So again, a bit like you said, you can have, you can use their royalty-free music. You can create jingles. You can kind of do lots within the app. I use it at its bare minimum of I upload and then click and go. And that's been enough for me. So I highly recommend it. Super simple.
Yeah. So did you have or do you have an overarching kind of goal for your podcast?
Well, I guess, there's always going to be an element that I want it to make sense for my business. What I've realized over the years is the thing I love about podcasting, which is very different to something maybe like social media, is you don't necessarily know who's listening, and you don't necessarily know how long people are listening for. And then, I've had clients who then go, oh, I discovered you because of your podcast, and, 6 months ago or a year ago. So I love that it's a platform that can help my business and help my business grow and introduce clients to me and introduce me to new people. So that's definitely part of it. And the way I'm kind of moving, the content is far more kind of business centric. But as I said, kind of right at the beginning, like positive psychology is something that I'm so passionate about that I really am kind of on a mission to raise awareness of positive psychology in all aspects of life. And I think podcasting just has this incredible ability to reach people, that you would never be able to reach in any other way. And so I guess one of my overall goals as well is to raise awareness about positive psychology and how everybody can integrate that incredible science into their life and improve their well-being. So it's kind of two prongs. Like, yes, lovely to have clients and grow my business, but also genuinely part of my mission is to just raise awareness of this, incredible thing.
Yeah. That is exactly what I love about podcasts as well. You can reach audiences far and wide. And sometimes when you look at your stats and you look at the different countries that have listened, and it's like, gosh, didn't realize somebody from there would like, and you wouldn't never be able to do that years ago, would you? Be able to access, obviously, like we say, with technology coming along as well. And I like what you said, like at the beginning, going back to what you said at the beginning about it being like a personal voice in your ear. That is exactly how I think about podcasts. And when I've listened to them and got into, when I first kind of like fell down the podcast rabbit hole, if you will, that was one of the things that I liked about it, that you do feel like that person's talking to you. And it is a really great way for people to get to know you as a business owner as well. Obviously, it's, that's not the sole reason why you're doing your podcast. Same with me. I want to be able to help women who don't know what to do with starting a podcast or need some help with their podcasting. So that's kind of the idea around it. But it is a way for them to get to know who you are, what you talk like, whether they feel like they would gel with you. So it's a kind of a nice, I don't know, pre-qualifier kind of thing as well for them to get to know you a little bit more. I find it with social media, and I was saying this to somebody the other day in a networking group, I kind of prefer talking like one-on-one or in a networking group. I found this recently, because on social media, when you're writing comments and things like that, which is fine, it's a nice way to keep in touch, it's kind of like a text or something. But I feel like you don't really get to know somebody very well unless you have some conversations with them as well. And that's when you get to know whether you really gel with them. And I think podcasting can be a great introducer to that from your perspective as a business owner. And then perhaps being part of your community, and then engage with those people on a personal level after they've listened to the episode as well. But I feel like it's a really great communicator.
It's definitely like a connection builder. And I think, like, picking up on what you said, I totally agree. The hearing someone's voice is so key to that know, like, and trust. Because I think, you know, we're facing a world where we see so much like text and, you know, emails, and they're great and they have their place and I love them too. But there's nothing like hearing the way somebody says something and hearing what their personality is like, and, you know, when they laugh and what they, you know, and I just think that's why podcasting, I know when I listen and when I sort of binge listen, particularly when you really get into a podcast, you're like, oh, I'm going to listen to like 5 episodes on the trot. You feel like you know that person, don't you? Like you definitely feel like if you were to bump into them, you could have a conversation because you know what they sound like and how they speak.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite a special, you know, a special thing that you don't get on all the other kind of platforms.
No, and I do think that once you've listened to someone's podcast and you are consuming their social media content, like, because I've listened to your podcast and when I read your posts, I can kind of hear your voice anyway coming through your posts because I've listened and I know what you sound like and what you're talking about and things. So that's kind of like maybe a nice addition that could happen as well for people that are looking at your content online. Speaking of social media and online content, so how do you go about promoting your podcast?
So anywhere and everywhere, basically. Anywhere that you show up, talk about it. I think one of the biggest things I would say is host it on your website if you've got a website. So I've got a page that my podcast episodes get fed into, and so that I have, it's essentially like a blog post for every podcast episode. And, you know, there's a couple of reasons for that. It means that if people find you, they will, like, if they're a podcast like listener, they will likely navigate and try and see if you've got one. It's great for your SEO, so it means your podcast is more searchable, and it also means it's great when you're marketing to feed the traffic through your own site, you know, before they then go on to SoundCloud or Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts or whatever. Feed it through, because, you know, I'm a digital marketer through and through, so I want you to have the traffic right first. So if you're hosting your podcast on your own website, you know, in terms of having them on a page, that can really, really help. So that's the first kind of thing that I did, was made sure I had a podcast tab on my blog, podcast tab on my business website. And then it's, you know, shouting about it on all your social media platforms. It's talking about it in person at events. You know, we forget in the online space, we can still communicate in actual real life, you know, and say, do you like podcasts? I've got one here. Get it up on your, you know, on your iPhone, and also in groups that you're a part of, you know, online or otherwise. So, you know, share those episodes if you know that something's a useful topic to people that are in the group, and it's okay to do so. Share it, like share the episode. I feel like podcast is very similar to blogging, which is obviously why I'm drawn to it, in that you can run the danger of thinking, oh, I've done the episode, I'll never talk about it again. When actually the beauty of podcasting, just like blog posts, is you can repurpose it again and again. You can pull out an episode from the archives and talk about it again. You know, people are going to find you at different times. And unlike a social media feed where it's kind of gone after a few days, you can go back to the beginning and listen from, you know, 4 years ago if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So I always say keep sharing and repurposing and kind of, pointing backwards as well as, you know, to your current episodes.
Yeah, repurposing is a big one, I think. And one of my clients has Meet Edgar, and they use, it's really good for evergreen content. So you can plug all your content in, and then it will like shuffle all the stuff. So it kind of shuffles.
Cool.
They've got different clips, sometimes a full length episode. So that works really well for them. So I see them repurposing their stuff all the time. And now with my own, I kind of do mine on a 4-weekly basis, like I batch mine. And I have now, because I just ended up thinking, why am I not talking about all my other episodes? So like bringing those back into my current, what I'm doing for my digital marketing is bringing those episodes back out. And talking about them, because like you say, they are still relevant and people are joining you at different points in their journey. So they may really want to go back and listen to that at the beginning. And I think that as well, you've got like a a massive big content bank there for yourself, and you can keep repurposing them in terms of whole episode clips,
Yeah.
creating social media captions, creating carousels. There's a whole load of things that you can do with them. And yeah, rather than kind of, it is easy to forget things. I've done those.
Yeah,
And
and they're there
yeah,
in the vault. But yeah,
yeah,
and I certainly, something else that maybe people wouldn't think of is, if you're creating blog posts, for instance, you can, if you're talking about a topic, you can say, oh, if you like this or you want to know a little bit more, I've recorded a podcast episode on it, and just, embed a link. It doesn't always have to be all
yeah.
singing or dancing like promotion, but it's that kind of, linking that journey that you want your audience to go on when they find you. And if they're landing on your website and they're interested in a topic, can you serve them a podcast episode to take them to that space, and it's really thinking of that user journey, or that audience journey. Yeah, which is why I love it.
Talking about audience, what is your target audience? I know you talked about having mums and entrepreneurs. Is it more specific now that you've pivoted towards more the mentor side of things?
I think, it's largely the same. I predominantly help women solopreneurs. So women who are building their businesses pretty much single-handedly. Now, as I've grown and my clients grow, that turns into, women entrepreneurs with little teams of people and, or business partners. So it's not like I'm only ever work with women who only work on their own, but I think predominantly solopreneurs who are probably, started their business journey. So they're in it and they know that they want to do it, and they know that they're doing something that kind of works, but they don't know where to go next and they don't know how to build it. Like, that's where I can really help women and support them and help them flourish in their businesses and their income, but also just feeling good doing it, because I think this is part of it. Like, we need to enjoy and have fun whilst we do it. We don't start working for ourselves for an easy ride. It's not the easy option. No. Despite what some people might think or what it might look like on social media, you don't work for yourself for the easy option. You work for yourself because you want to change the world, or you love it. You want to change the way your life is. So it's not about, it being easy, but it's about, it should be fun and it should be enjoyable. And that's what I aim to help women kind of figure out,
Yeah, it's it should be fun. And I mean, it isn't, like I said, it isn't easy and you do have those hard days, but having that guidance to help you, get on that way and stay positive and enjoy it is an important thing. I've seen a lot about your away, is it your away days that you do?
My retreat,
that's it. Oh, and fabulous pictures of the retreat. Looks amazing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have I think what Rachel's referring to probably is my Tuscan retreat that I've just come back from. So it's the first one I've held. For those, you guys will not know me listening to this, but I have family in Italy as well, so I'm very fortunate to be able to spend summers in Italy, and it's part of my why, and it's part of why I do what I do, so to allow me to do that and have my time with the family there. And it holds a very special place in my heart. So I've always talked about Tuscany being my happy place, about the place where I am at my best, most creative, where all my business ideas come. And I thought, I need to take my clients, I need to take my clients there. I need them to experience this too. So I did. So I hosted my first kind of mastermind retreat. So 3 days, 9 women in a house in Tuscany, really kind of thrashing out their businesses, supporting each other, learning from each other. And it was so incredible. And I think, I've really realized, and, this is why I love podcasting. I've said a couple of times, I like depth and connection with people. Yeah. And so for me, next year is going to be about how I can create that, how I can create experiences that allow that depth and connection. And I think when it comes to business and development, you are going to remember a moment where you were like sat in Tuscany and having this incredible experience and came up with an amazing business idea or felt really validated more than potentially sitting online and like doing a course, you know, and and everything. And I'm not saying that that's not got its place as well, because I still firmly believe in that kind of learning too. But I want to add that extra element to what I do, the work that I do with my clients. So there will be more retreats. There will be one in Tuscany, but there will also be some in the UK as well, in beautiful places in the UK. And there'll be more events, because I want to bring the flavour that I love online, but combine it with that depth that you can get in person as well. So that's where I'm building.
Right, it sounds really valuable. I do, as much as I love everything online and me starting, I mean, I started my business because I got made redundant, so it was like a pandemic kind of baby, if you will. But with doing a little bit more networking, seeing some people, it is nice to just think, actually having seen people, like we were saying earlier, seeing people in real life and having that extra connection is a really important thing for us all.
Absolutely. And if ideal scenario is you get the best of both worlds. You can build something incredible
and
online.
Who doesn't want to go to Tuscany?
Well, you know,
the food looks amazing. I was so jealous.
Oh, yeah. So that's my happy place for sure.
Yeah. Oh, it's been great talking to you today, Holly. I'd just like to finish off with asking if you just have you've offered lots of pieces of advice during our chat, but do you have one piece of advice for anyone starting out their podcasts?
I've kind of got, I guess, two angles of advice. So one is, if you're somebody that you know you want to do it, but you're getting blocked by, you know, the big picture of it, you're getting overwhelmed by what it could be, I would say don't overthink it. It's okay to just give something a go and kind of figure it out as you go along, because there will be certain personality types that need to know that, right? And, you know, so don't become overwhelmed by it being a huge thing. The kind of second, I guess, prong to that bit of advice is get support. You know, if that's what's stopping you, if the idea of editing it, sorting it, arranging it, all of that is too much, but you know you want this to be a part of this channel, get support. You know, get somebody to help you organize it, you know, edit it, whatever. We've got lovely you sat here, Rachel. There's people like yourselves. You know, I now get my VA to help me coordinate some of the elements of my podcasting so that it fits in and doesn't feel like a chore. And I just think, if you know you want a podcast, but something like that's holding you back, don't let it, because it doesn't have to.
Yeah. Brilliant advice. Thank you, Holly. And do you want to if people want to get in touch with you to find out more about what you do, where's the best place to do that?
So obviously, come listen to me on my podcast, Can We Have It All? And, you know, I always encourage people there to come over onto Instagram. My business Instagram is at the Flourish Mentor. I love people to slide into my DMs, so please do feel like you can do that, because I'm always sat there ready to reply. And if all else fails, everything about me and what I do is on my website, which is holly-wood.co.uk.
Brilliant. I will put all those links in the show notes as well, so people can listen to your podcast and find you easily.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Holly. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like to connect with me or get in touch, then head on over to my website. If you liked the episode, then I'd love it if you could leave me a review in your chosen podcast app. Your feedback is much appreciated. See you next time.